Okay, so we are on the second video diary. It's been a little too much time that has passed between the first and second one, but we're here, we're doing this because we are committed to documenting what we're going through here. So one thing I was just talking about to Steve right before this was that I think what we want to do is start keeping track of some of our crazy highlights, like the headlines of things we did this past week, things that we were solving, issues we were solving, some of the stuff we've been doing as we're going through this process, because there's a lot of working in the business, working on the business, working in the business, working on the business. And it's a lot to juggle. Plus with our 5 kids, plus I have other endeavors. I'm in the middle of writing an album. I have other businesses. So it's a lot to juggle. It's a lot. And sometimes I don't even sleep that well because I think my brain is just going constantly. But that was an issue before we were even, serious entrepreneurs. So I think it just continued. And now I have somewhere to put all that energy, right, into businesses and doing things. But I think we're going to start doing headlines and highlights or something, because so much happens in a week for Steve and I that it's almost impossible to remember it. And when we go to do this diary, our minds almost go blank. We're like, what do we even talk about? Like half the time, we don't even know what day of the week it is. We don't even know if we're on planet Earth. We don't know, I don't know. Don't ask me my kids' birthdays or if there's like a holiday coming up. That does not exist in our mind unless it's in a calendar and we have 14 reminders to tell us that. So that's how much is going on any given day. So with that said, I think we're going to keep track of headlines and highlights, and we're going to try that and see if it works. But for now, we're just going to do more of like a little bit more of a format because it can help us relieve us of that blank mind syndrome when we hop onto these. So the first thing I think we're going to do is a check-in. And we do this at the beginning of a lot of meetings. We do this with our board as well. Like we're just do a quick check-in. How are you feeling? What's your headspace? Where are you at right now? Going through what we're doing right now, which is growing our company as big as it can be in Mythology Candles.
I'm feeling good, but definitely scattered, particularly today. There's a few things we're trying to do in hopes to really plan out a little bit more granularly the first quarter of next year. Specifically, I'm working on, the inventories and things that we're going to need to order and whatnot. Anyway, so working on that and getting about 100,000 distractions, people pinging me and calling me and texting me and kids coming in my office and all this. So it's been really hard to focus. But
that's almost like a typical day around here too, right? Where we get some days are worse than others, but like the constant interruptions and distractions, it's really nuts. I mean, between our phones, communication platforms like Slack, and then kids, did I already say kids?
Maybe, I don't know.
I don't remember. So it's already gone from my mind. But yeah, between those things, I mean, how do we do anything, right?
Yeah, good question. We just go, we take action. We do try to plan too. We have, I think, what I call a spontaneous calendar. It's planned out, but it's also, there's room for spontaneousness to happen because it just does all the time. So I think we've just learned to be really flexible. In cases like today, when it's like, there's actually about 5 super important projects that I need to do that I probably won't get done, but I know that. But I do have the intention of moving forward on all of them. But one of them is going to get my focus, and that's what I'm going to work on until I'm done, and then I'll move on to the next one. So anyways, just, feeling a little scattered. But just also pretty good, positive. I know it'll get done.
Yeah. And for my check-in, I would also say I'm feeling, I have several of those days a week, I feel like, where I'm very scattered. And the reason is because there's not sometimes clear delineation of time between some of my different endeavors and businesses and tasks and people and communication. It's all one giant big spaghetti pot where everything is meshed in together. And so that can leave me feeling a little scattered, but it's the way it is. I have tried, time blocking where this business on this day, this business on this day, it works for a week and then it doesn't work anymore because it just doesn't. So I have yet to master how to have more than one business and not feel scattered. It's not like things do move forward and things get done, but primarily my time is focused on mythology. That is the biggest thing that we are working on. So, that becomes the priority. I think the other thing that here's one improvement that we've made in terms of our time blocking. And this has helped me now for several weeks. We have now changed that all of our meetings, at least for mythology, all of the meetings that would normally be scattered throughout the week happen on one day, and that's Tuesday. So from 9 a.m. till sometimes 9 o'clock at night or whatever, however many meetings we can pack into one day, they're happening on one day. It's a little bit excruciating in some ways, and your butt hurts after sitting there for that long. But you're doing jumping jacks in between and trying to eat and go to the bathroom and do things in between. But having them all on one day frees up those other days to go and do stuff. And I find that having meetings scattered throughout the week is so counterproductive to just getting in a groove, and it interrupts your momentum. So that's one thing we've changed. And I feel like that has been really good. Yep. So yeah, that's been an awesome thing. So I'm feeling, my check-in for now is I'm feeling empowered and supported, but also very challenged. And just, for me, it's a tug of war between feeling like we can do it. And then also feeling like, oh my gosh, we don't have a system for that. Or it's between that and like this feeling of chaos. So, and it's partially because, and the chaos is coming more from the internal side of things, the lack of systems and processes where we know we need it. And also, that Les McEwen book, Predictable Success, he talks about being in the whitewater stage. And that's what we're in, whitewater, where maybe you can describe it a little better, Steve, because you're rereading that book right now. What's whitewater?
Well, it's totally normal. In fact, every single business that doesn't go out of business immediately goes through whitewater. And it's the stage where your business is basically screaming at you saying that these systems no longer work, or you don't have any systems. And if you don't put them in place right away, we're going to crash. That's whitewater. And what happens in whitewater is a lot of miscommunications, frustrations, people pointing fingers and blaming, why wasn't this done? Or you saying, wait a minute, what happened to that? Every day. That's whitewater.
Is it also characterized by a certain level of revenue?
It could happen if you're the only employee.
Then you guess you're pointing the finger at yourself.
It has nothing to do with the size of your team. It has nothing to do with your revenue. It has to do with your systems and processes strictly.
Yeah.
And obviously communication is a big part of your systems and processes.
Yeah. I was going to say, what's really funny about that is people would probably expect someone as creative and artsy fartsy as me to not be a systems person. Mm-hmm. But what I'm finding out more and more is like, I actually, the way I see systems and processes is it's the canvas for you to paint on. If an artist doesn't even have a canvas, there's no borders, there's no parameters, there's no guidance as to where to paint. And so therefore it actually becomes so overwhelming, you just give up, you don't even paint at all because it's too overwhelming. I got nothing to work with. Whereas having borders and boundaries and parameters, those are systems and processes. It actually opens up and just breaks loose all the creativity. So I actually thrive with, at least with a team. that has systems and processes, at least internally. And then also where we're lacking is systems and processes more on the financial side of things. There's, forecasting and all of those, they're kind of complex. But by, our simplistic systems that we had, you could get away with a lot when you're only at $1 million or less. You can that's what we found. You can wing it quite a bit and get away with it. But we are, this is what I actually say this on our team meetings. We are at the point we can no longer wing it. There's no more winging it. We are going to become more and more data driven, more and more systems driven. And really the way I see it is systems and processes with like genius creativity. That's your republic. That's the checks and the balances. And it really is like a magical combination. So creativity with the, what some people would perceive as boring systems and processes and formulas and math, whatever. But together, that's where the magic is going to happen. If you only had one, you might come up with a great product or whatever, but you'll go bankrupt in 6 months, right? Without those systems and process, or everybody will leave your organization because it's chaos, complete chaos and confusion. If you only have the data and you only have that stuff, you don't have that rocket fuel, you don't have that spark, you don't have the passion. There's nobody to have their finger on the pulse of the market. You're just missing so many things. Right. So it's that combination that I see as absolute dynamite. And that's where we're getting. We've had more on the other side of like, we've had the market pulse, we've had the customer connection, that journey, that story, all the creative side, the product development, we've had all that side. And then we kind of been winging some of the things on the other side. And we are at that place where that will not work anymore. So this is what I tell our team, this is what I tell ourselves. And as we're, working with our advisors more, those kinds of things are being really drilled in. So yeah.
And by the way, what you're talking about is predictable success, right? It's the passion, the vision tied with systems and processes, because on one side, without systems and processes, you're in the whitewater, which is where we're at. So then on the other side, if it's only systems and processes, no passion, no vision, then you're in the death rattle. So predictable success is right up in the middle.
What's the death rattle?
The death rattle is when you're so dependent on systems and processes that there's no creativity, there's no spark, there's no passion, and you're dying, and you will die if you don't change it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that, we make a pretty good team in that way. And I think sometimes what I like about Les McEwen and his things is because that synergist quiz is so good. But, if you get like a visionary like me, I'm off the charts visionary. Like I go way off. I'm not even on the spectrum. But if you work with like a processor where they're just all spreadsheets all day long, like there's friction there because of that dynamic. And so that's when you need those synergist people. And then the operators like you to just bring it, just like is harmonious when you have all those team members together. And, we are definitely building that out. Yep. But bringing in systems and processes into, we're a small business at this point. When you've been winging it a lot, can be a bit of a painful process, more painful for some than others, will say. Some people are like craving and they're like, oh my gosh, like they've been dying without the systems and processes that have been desperately needed. And then other people kind of resist the systems and processes. They're like, we don't need that. So it can be a little bit of a uncomfortable transition trying to bring those things in. And then sometimes you bring in a system or process and it didn't work great. And then it's like, we got to change the system and process to something else. And so it's just always this kind of a roller coaster of figuring out what's going to work. So let's move on to lessons learned. That was a long check-in, but I feel like there was some good stuff in there. But let's move to lessons learned this past like week or two. What has been a primary lesson that you are still feel like you're learning, or just like big epiphany?
Yeah. I think a lot of us hear the word cash flow and we have an idea of what it means. I certainly did. But when you realize what it actually is and how granular knowing your cash flow is, that's the mind-blowing part. Yeah, when you're at the stage that we are at, which is we're on track to do over 3 million this year. That aside, we have over 20 employees. We do, $250,000 plus every month in sales. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of cash going out, and there's a lot of cash coming in. And it's easy to lose track of where the cash is going and where it needs to go. So what we have been learning, this whole lessons learned thing, is how critical to life cash flow is. The life of the business. It's like blood to your body. If you don't have it, you're dead. So without positive cash flow, your business is dying. So some of the things related to that is something that's been helpful actually is having accountability, which, I have some level of accountability, but when you're a startup, you and I are the owners, the founders, and everything else, and there's multiple hats that we wear. It's easy without proper education. I don't have financial education. We can build a business, sure, but when I'm not an accountant, I'm not a CPA, I'm not even close to that. I like math, but that's beyond me. So having another level of accountability with a board of advisors, which we have now, is really good for me, because that helps me kind of, I have people to bounce things off of outside of yourself. People who know more about cash flow than you and I do, Leah, and who know more about growing a business than you and I do, to have that level of accountability and, somebody to check things off of and run things by has been really helpful for me just in the last week, even like, hey, we need to order X materials. It's going to cost this much. How should we arrange that? When should we purchase that? From where are those funds going to come? Right. All that kind of thing. That's been really helpful.
Yeah. And on that note too, another really huge thing that I would say that we could learn about cash flow is really about, what about cash reserves? Because, essentially totally. This is, we know, oh yeah, that's important to do, but we didn't realize how crucial it is, as in like, this is an emergency. You need to have, 3 months worth of operating expenses sitting in a reserve account at all times that you don't touch unless you absolutely have to. So right. That's huge.
So if your expenses, the cost to run your business, people, materials, everything costs $100,000 a month, that means you need to have 300,000 sitting in the bank that you don't touch.
Right. And where do people get that money when they're just trying to, they're bootstrapping it like we've been?
Yeah, exactly. Funding.
Well, funding and or credit.
Yep. That's what I mean by funding. Credit. Some source of funding outside of yourself.
Right. And so, we've done what we've had to do to get till where we are now, which we've been fully bootstrapping. Zero outside capital investments, debt, nothing. It was like I think I started maybe with $5,000 of my own money put into this with just testing and experimenting in my kitchen. And then I funded the whole business till now just through pre-orders, for me, that was just an experiment. Put it out, like, let me, work some Facebook groups and see if people even get excited about this thing. I'll get them on an email list. I can set that up in, an hour, and then let me, get a Shopify going. That costs about $30 to get a Shopify going. I'll take photos on my phone and just see, I'll get an MVP that looks pretty good. Let me see if people get excited about this. If they do, then maybe I'll build my list a little bit and do a little pre-launch to them. I can always refund their money. There's really not a lot to lose, for under a couple $100 for that whole thing. Not a lot to lose. So we've gotten to where we are now with that methodology, which is pretty cool. But I can now also see the benefits of having startup capital as well, like especially with the industry we're in. I think there's a lot of industries where you could get away with maybe never having to get funding if it's a digital business or something, maybe at some point after it's validated and such. But with this industry where we're in a seasonal business and we're in a very, labor intensive type of physical product. Capital is everything now. We are trying to get, 2 to 3 seasons ahead of where we currently are. And if we don't have that capital to order raw materials to produce and manufacture that product, we're out of business. So now we're just really feeling it till now. Like I said, there was so much we could get away with that first year, up to that first million. We go into the 8-figure mark, which will happen next year. And then beyond, it's going to get bigger. Those purchase orders are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to get really insane. So you can't do that and bootstrap it.
No, you can't. Like in the first, for a lot of small businesses, maybe it's not as critical as it is for us, especially now, where eventually, so where we're at, our accounts payables are starting to add up. Like, we have net terms with a bunch of different vendors now, which we didn't have when we started because they wouldn't look at us because we had no proof of business, no proof of concept, no proof of sales. So nobody's going to give you net terms if you don't have credibility. But now we do, and those accounts are adding up. So you can't like you said earlier, you can't just wing it. You can't wing the finances. Everything has to have its place. And that's something that we're learning, and it's kind of painful. But it's also really good a lot of this process is pretty painful, both from the realization standpoint of what we've been missing, but also from the realization or the practical side of, well, now these are the things you have to start doing differently, right. Which means, okay, now we didn't have that process before. Now we have to start doing that. That's another, thing into the machine that you got to add into. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah. And I think that wraps up this week's video diary. We've said a lot. And if people end up watching this, I think there's actually a lot they can glean from that. And if someone is watching this, you have questions or you want clarification on what we're talking about, please leave a comment or send us a message, because that'll give us more to go off of for the next time. But this is meant for ourselves, but it's also, I hope, beneficial to whoever's tuning in, because this is a process. And Steve and I have learned a lot, but we know it's like it's that, I forget what it's called. There's not a syndrome, but the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything.
Dunning-Kruger effect.
The Dunning-Kruger effect. Yes. So I can say we've learned a lot, but there's so much more for us to learn. And on the other side of this, is there ever an other side of this? I don't know. But on the other side of this, we're going to be like, this is our level up. This is a huge level up for Steve and I. We've gotten, like I said, to here. But over here is a whole other world that we are about to embark on in.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah. All right. Well, that concludes today's video diary. We're going to try and keep these fairly concise so that I can convince Steve to keep coming back and doing these. So, all right. Thank you. And good night. Good day.
Bye.
Bye.